She was just a poor cleaner trying to survive. He was a blind man abandoned in the rain. But when Ava risked everything to help him, she never imagined he was actually a billionaire CEO in disguise. What started as an act of kindness led to betrayal, heartbreak, and a truth that would change both their lives forever. Who really is Eli Mercer, and why did he choose her? This isn't just a love story. It's a story of justice, redemption, and the power of standing up when it matters most. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The rain had just begun to fall when Ava Moore stepped off the hospital curb, a thin mist rising from the asphalt as tires rolled through shallow puddles. She held the small sun-shaped keychain in her palm like it was something sacred, something that still held the warmth of a man who had once sat barefoot in the rain and thanked her with a voice that wrapped around her like a lullaby. Eli was gone now, disappeared into the folds of the city, leaving behind only a short note and silence. Some stories have to unfold in silence before they can be told aloud. She read the words again and again, hoping they meant he would return, that he hadn't just vanished like so many good things in her life had. But for now, the keychain was all she had. That afternoon, Ava did what she always did. She carried on. She returned her uniform Lexwell Industries, walking past the same marble floors she had once scrubbed on hands and knees. No one greeted her. No one remembered. The receptionist barely looked up, just nodded at the folded garments and took them wordlessly. But Ava's gaze lingered on the lobby, where banners were being hung, lights adjusted, and security stationed. She paused near the entrance, just close enough to read the words on the towering display. Lexwell welcomes home our CEO, Mr. Elijah Mercer. The name hit her like cold water. Mercer, Eli. Her legs went stiff, her lungs froze mid-breath. Eli wasn't just anyone. He wasn't just some kind man lost in a storm. He was the Eli Mercer, heir to the Lexwell empire, one of the youngest CEOs in the nation, a man worth more than the combined yearly income of every tenant in her crumbling apartment building. And he had stayed in her room, eaten her rice, wiped his hands on her threadbare towels. She didn't go home that night. Not right away. She wandered the city streets as dusk spilled into night, her thoughts crashing into each other like waves against glass. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he let her believe he was just another lost soul in the storm? She'd risked everything for him. Her job, her dignity, her stability, what little she had of it. And all that time, he was hiding behind a secret worth billions. By the time she returned to her apartment, her feet were aching, her fingers numb from gripping the soaked canvas tote too tightly. The light in the hallway flickered once, then went dark entirely. She climbed the stairs by feel, each step heavier than the last. When she opened the door to her studio, something unfamiliar sat waiting for her. A woman in a tailored suit standing calmly in the shadows. Jessica. Not the clipped receptionist version Ava had met weeks ago, but the real Jessica, Lexwell's lead legal advisor, Eli's most trusted assistant, and one of the sharpest minds in corporate law. "Mr. Mercer would like to see you," Jessica said, her voice neither friendly nor cold, just certain. Ava didn't answer. She stood silently, rainwater dripping from the ends of her curls onto the cracked linoleum. Jessica extended a business card. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., you'll want to hear what he has to say." Ava stared at the card long after Jessica had gone. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her instincts screamed at her to toss it into the trash, to lock the door, to build walls around the wounded parts of her heart. But something else stirred too. Something quieter, stronger. Curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a desire for closure. Eli had vanished once before. This time, she would choose how the story continued. The elevator ride to the top floor of Lexwell Tower was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that hummed with expectation. Ava stood rigid, her fingers curling around the business card in her coat pocket. As the numbers blinked higher, 42, 43, 44, her heart pounded louder than the sleek hum of the machinery. What was she doing here? A girl who used to mop these floors now being summoned to the penthouse of the man who had shattered her trust. The doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a space bathed in natural light, too pristine to feel real. Marble floors stretched across the room like ice, and towering windows opened up to a city that looked almost forgiving from this height. But Ava didn't feel small. She felt ready. He was there. Standing with his back to her, facing the skyline, a figure carved in shadow and glass. Eli. No Cain this time, just him, still, poised, a storm beneath the surface. He turned slowly at the sound of her footsteps. His expression was calm, but it wasn't unreadable anymore. She could see the tension in the way his jaw twitched slightly, the weight in his shoulders. "Ava," he said softly, as though her name meant more than air. But she didn't respond, not right away. "So it's Elijah Mercer now," she said finally, her voice low, steady. "Was I ever supposed to know?" "I wanted to tell you," he said, taking a step forward. "I planned to, but I didn't know how or when. You didn't know how to tell me you were one of the richest men in the country while you were wrapped in my blanket eating my rice?" Her voice tightened, a thread of pain weaving through her words. "You watched me get fired. You let them humiliate me. And then you disappeared." "I left because staying would have made it worse," Eli replied, his voice a mixture of regret and restraint. "You saw me without the name, without the wealth. No expectations, no agenda. I didn't want to ruin that." "But you did," she said flatly. "You ruined it the moment you let me believe you were powerless." Eli closed the distance between them with slow, careful steps. "I was powerless," he said. "You think money changes that? I couldn't even stop you from crying when you thought no one believed you. I couldn't stop Vanessa from hurting you, from twisting the truth. That broke something in me, Ava." She looked at him then, really looked. Beneath the tailored suit, beneath the billion-dollar legacy, there was still the man from the rain. Tired, soaked, reaching out blindly in a world too quick to turn away. "Then why now?" she asked. "Why call me here?" "Because I want to make it right," he said. "Not just for you, for all of it. I can't erase what happened, but I can face it. I can face her." Ava's brow furrowed. "Vanessa?" Eli nodded. "She made too many assumptions, hurt too many people. She created a culture of cruelty inside Lexwell, and I allowed it to fester. But that ends today." Ava's arms crossed. "You're going to fire her?" "I'm going to confront her," he said. "And I want you there. You deserve to hear the truth spoken aloud. You deserve to be seen." She hesitated, eyes narrowing. "And what happens after that?" Eli took a deep breath. "That's up to you." Ava didn't answer immediately. The room buzzed with unspoken things, old wounds, lingering hope, fragile forgiveness waiting on the edge of breath. She glanced toward the skyline, then back at him. He wasn't just Eli anymore. But he wasn't just Elijah Mercer either. He was both. And maybe that's what scared her the most, that she still wanted to believe him. "All right," she said finally. "I'll come. But this isn't about second chances. This is about closure." Eli gave a faint nod. "That's fair." And as Ava turned toward the door, ready to face the woman who had tried to break her, she didn't feel like a poor girl anymore. She felt like a storm. The conference room at Lexwell's executive wing was nothing like the broom closets and bleach-slicked hallways Ava once knew. This space was carved from steel and silence, with walls of tempered glass and a table long enough to host nations. The kind of place where power whispered instead of shouted. Ava stood beside Eli at the head of the table, her reflection staring back at her in the gleaming surface. She felt out of place in her borrowed blazer and worn shoes, but she stood tall. This wasn't about image anymore. This was about truth. Vanessa entered like she owned the air around her. Her heels clicked confidently, her silk blouse perfectly pressed, her hair coiled in effortless perfection. But when she saw Ava standing next to Eli, something faltered in her expression, a twitch in her brow, a flare in her nostrils. She recovered quickly, offering Eli a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Mercer," she said smoothly, ignoring Ava entirely. "I didn't expect to see you this morning." "I'm full of surprises," Eli replied, his tone neutral, unreadable. Vanessa took the seat closest to him, legs crossed neatly, hands folded like a magazine cover. "So what's this about?" "I have a quarterly call with Paris in 20. Eli didn't sit. Neither did Ava. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recorder, setting it gently on the table. "It's about something that happened 2 weeks ago. Something I think you remember quite well." Vanessa blinked. "You'll have to be more specific." "You accused an employee, Ava Moore, of theft, publicly, without evidence, and then you had her terminated." Vanessa gave a hollow laugh. "Mr. Mercer, with all due respect, I manage hundreds of employees. I make judgment calls. That's part of my job. Eli tilted his head slightly. So is accountability. Vanessa's smile twitched. You're defending the janitor? She has a name, he said, and more integrity in her silence than you've shown in your entire tenure. Something icy slipped into Vanessa's expression. You weren't even here. How do you know what happened? I was here, Eli said quietly. You just didn't recognize me. The silence that followed was razor-sharp. Vanessa's eyes darted between him and Ava. That day, the man she brought into the building was me, Eli confirmed. The blind man you mocked, the filthy creature you dismissed. You called security. You humiliated someone who showed more grace than the entire executive floor combined. Vanessa's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I am, he said. Deadly. She stood abruptly. This is absurd. She violated protocol. She brought in a stranger. She brought in a human being, Eli countered. And the only thing she violated was the unspoken rule of pretending people like you don't exist. But that changes now. Ava watched, heart pounding, as Eli's voice stayed calm, steady like the rain that first brought them together. You abused your power, he continued. You turned Lexwell into a fortress for cruelty, and I let it happen while I was blind in more ways than one. But I'm awake now. Vanessa's face blanched. Eli turned to Ava. Would you like to say anything? Ava stepped forward, her voice quiet but unwavering. You said I was trash, she said to Vanessa. You tried to shame me for caring about someone. But kindness doesn't make me weak. It makes me stronger than you'll ever be. Vanessa opened her mouth, but Eli raised a hand. This meeting's over. Later that day, an internal memo announced Vanessa Klein's resignation. There were no tears, no speeches, just an office emptied of malice and a hallway that felt a little brighter. That night, Eli called Ava into his office again. Not the conference room, but a smaller space filled with warm lighting and quiet music. You were incredible today, he said. I wasn't alone, Ava replied. Not this time. They stood there in the soft glow of the city beyond the windows, two people from different worlds, now walking the same path. For the first time in days, Ava allowed herself a small, real smile, and Eli smiled back. A week had passed since Vanessa's exit, but the ripple effects still echoed through Lexwell's halls like a change in air pressure. People walked differently now, less stiff, less afraid. Ava noticed it in the way receptionists smiled more freely, in how the janitorial staff suddenly got nods instead of side glances. The power dynamic had shifted, and somehow, without trying to, Ava had become a symbol of something larger than herself. But she hadn't asked for any of it. That morning, she found herself summoned once again, but this time to Eli's office. Not the penthouse, not the polished conference room, but a sunlit corner suite with books on real wooden shelves and a view of the city that didn't feel like it was looking down on it. Eli greeted her with a smile that didn't feel rehearsed. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit, please. Ava lowered herself slowly, unsure what today would bring. I want to offer you a position, Eli said without preamble. Ava blinked. A job? He nodded. A real one, not just a gesture. I want you to lead a new branch we're forming, Lexwell's Social Ethics and Inclusion Initiative. It's something I should have built years ago, but I wasn't listening then. She stared at him. You want me to lead it? I do. You've lived what others only analyze in meetings. You know what it feels like to be invisible, to be judged. You'd build this from the ground up, with full autonomy, your voice, your rules. Ava's fingers curled around the arms of the chair. Her instinct was to say no, to question why he was doing this. If this was guilt, if it was just a well-dressed apology. But then she remembered how she'd looked Vanessa in the eye and refused to shrink, how her voice had made a room full of executives stop breathing for a moment. And maybe, for the first time, she realized she wasn't powerless anymore. I'll take it, she said. But I'm not interested in being your redemption story. I want to make actual change. Eli smiled. Good, that's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Over the following days, Ava threw herself into her work with the same intensity she once used to scrub tile grout. But this time it wasn't about survival. It was about creation. She interviewed employees from every level of Lexwell, janitors, secretaries, cafeteria workers, even security guards. She asked them what they wanted to change. What had hurt them? What no one had ever asked before. Word spread fast that the girl who once mopped the lobby was now writing policy. that the cleaner who got fired was now walking into boardrooms with purpose. And Eli? He stayed nearby, but never overshadowed. He showed up at meetings when she asked, sat quietly in brainstorming sessions, and once left her a post-it that simply read, "Your voice is changing things." They began seeing more of each other, not just as CEO and director, but as Eli and Ava. They shared lunch in the company garden, debated over coffee about housing projects and wage transparency, laughed at how awkward their first real conversation in the penthouse had been. Ava still hadn't forgotten the pain, but it didn't control her anymore. One evening, after a particularly long day of department interviews, Eli offered to walk her out. The sky outside was turning soft with sunset, the city below them glittering like embers in a breeze. "Do you ever regret it?" Ava asked, pausing at the edge of the rooftop garden. "Pretending to be someone else, just to see how people would treat you?" Eli considered it. "No," he said after a beat, "because it brought me here, to you, and maybe for the first time in my life I finally know what matters." Ava looked at him, really looked, and saw not a billionaire, not a mystery, but a man still learning how to be seen. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She just stayed beside him, watching the sun dip below the buildings, their silence rich with something new, something real. Weeks slipped by, not with the speed of chaos, but the steady rhythm of healing. Ava rose each day before dawn, not because she had to scrub floors, but because purpose now pulled her from sleep like sunlight through curtains. She had built a small team, 3 people, all once considered background noise in Lexwell's echoing machine, now given seats at the table. Together, they drafted new policies, rewrote employee training, and held listening sessions that sometimes left the room in tears. What began as a fragile experiment in dignity had turned into a movement. Lexwell was changing, and somehow, so was she. Yet there were quiet moments when Ava still wondered, if Eli hadn't been Eli, would this have happened? Would anyone have listened? Would her voice have mattered? Those thoughts crept in during late nights when the city was too still and her heart too loud. But then she'd wake to emails from workers thanking her, or past the receptionist who now called her by name and offered real smiles, not just protocol. She'd remember what she had stood for in that hallway, soaked in rain, facing down power in designer heels, and she'd breathe a little easier. Eli remained close, but respectful. He was around just enough to help, never enough to interfere. Sometimes they'd exchange knowing glances across long meetings. Other times he'd pause outside her office to drop off coffee and a sarcastic note. "Reminder, you're doing great. Don't screw it up." She'd reply by sticking a yellow post-it to his door, still deciding whether to forgive you. It was their dance, unspoken, uncertain, but growing steadier with each step. One Friday evening, as she gathered her things, Eli appeared in the doorway. His tie was loosened, jacket folded over his arms, sleeves rolled to the elbow, more human than high-powered. "Come with me," he said simply. She hesitated, studying him. "Where? You'll see." They drove in silence, windows down, the warm breeze tugging at her curls. He took them outside the city, down winding roads Ava didn't recognize, until the skyline gave way to rolling hills and quiet air. Eventually they stopped at a small, restored building tucked behind a grove of trees. A wooden sign hung near the entrance, "The Hearth Project, coming soon." Eli stepped out, walking toward the door with a key in hand. "This was my parents' old estate," he said. "I hated it growing up, too big, too cold, but I've had it renovated. It's going to be a shelter, transitional housing, workshops, meals. We'll offer job training, childcare, real second chances." Ava's breath caught. "You're funding this?" He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "You inspired it." She stepped inside slowly, the scent of fresh paint and wood polish meeting her. The rooms were warm, lived in almost. A fireplace at the center of the main hall, sofas, books, no marble, no glass walls, just comfort, humanity, hope. They stood in silence until Eli finally spoke again. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for how we started," he said, voice quiet, "but I meant every word I said on that bench in the rain. I still do." Ava turned to him, her eyes soft. "I know you do, and I think—" She paused, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm tired of holding on to anger. It's heavy." Eli nodded slowly. "So what now?" She looked around the room, then back at him. "Now we build something better, together." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees with a hush that sounded a little like applause. And in that quiet, beneath the roof of a place once built for privilege and now repurposed for purpose, two people, once strangers, now something more, stood side by side, no longer lost in the storm. They had found something more powerful than secrets, than status. They had found each other. And this time, neither one ran. In the end, Ava and Eli's story isn't just about a cleaner and a billionaire. It's about what happens when kindness defies judgment and when courage is found in the most ordinary people. Ava could have walked past Eli that day in the rain. She had every reason to. She was tired, late, and struggling herself. But she stopped. Not because she expected anything in return, but because it was right. And that single choice changed everything. This story reminds us that compassion doesn't require wealth or status. It requires heart. That integrity means doing the right thing, even when it costs you. And that real power isn't measured by titles, but by how you treat those with none. Eli had influence, but it was Ava's bravery that made a difference. Her voice, once overlooked, became a force for change. And Eli, in learning to listen, became the man he was always meant to be. We all have a choice, to pass by or to pause, to stay silent or to speak up. Ava chose to see someone that the world ignored. Eli chose to lift someone who once lifted him. And in that mutual humanity, they found something rare: healing, hope, and love, born not from wealth, but from truth. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe in goodness again, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and awaken the soul. Let's keep kindness alive, one story at a time.